Hi guys, it's me Quinn, and as always, if you appreciate my content, consider hitting the like button. It's the only way the YouTube algorithm really notices me.
Hi guys, it's Quinn again, and today we're going to discuss a topic that people bring up to me a lot, and even people that have read the entire Dune saga, a lot of people are kind of fuzzy on this. So we're going to talk about the metamorphosis of Paul Atreides' son, Leto II, and the ramifications of it, the personal ramifications of it specifically, and the reasons behind it, and also the way it happened and how he was able to do this. So to understand it, we have to start with the Bene Gesserit, the order of women that have been secretly manipulating the bloodlines of various people in the Dune Universe for thousands of years. So the Bene Gesserit have extreme control over their internal chemistry. They can control their internal chemistry down to a molecular level. They can remove poisons. They can convert substances into other substances within their body. So they have this extreme control. And Paul Atreides was trained in the Bene Gesserit way because his mother was a Bene Gesserit and she was attempting to produce the Kwisatz Haderach by having him and training him in the Bene Gesserit way. Now, Paul's children, Leto and Ganima, because of their genes, which were manipulated by the Bene Gesserit, in addition to the spice-heavy diet that their mother was on during the pregnancy, were pre-born. And the book Children of Dune is largely about the ramifications of someone being pre-born and how they struggle against the multitude of lives that live within them. Because when someone is pre-born, they are born with the memories of all of their ancestors. So there's all of these other people that have lived in their mind. So they don't really have a solid ground. They don't really have a solid basis for personality. They're not a person themselves. And so often what happens is what the Bene Gesserit have named abomination. And this is when one of the inner lives becomes the dominant mind in this person. And it's usually a malignant mind. It's usually like a crazed mind. For instance, spoiler alert, Paul's sister Aaliyah, who is also preborn, in the book Children of Dune, succumbs to abomination and she is possessed by the ego memory of the Baron, who is, spoiler alert, her grandfather. He's the grandfather of Paul and Leah, in case you didn't know that. And so she succumbs to that. So throughout Children of Dune, you have Leto and Ganima recognizing the fact that their aunt has been possessed by the Baron and wondering if they too can avoid becoming eventually possessed by some ego memory within their own mind. Now, because of the fact that they are preborn, these children are also born with the memories of their ancestors, and so they've also inherited Bene Gesserit memories. So, like Paul, like their grandmother Jessica, they too possess the same internal control that Bene Gesserit possess. And that is crucial in how Leto II was able to become what he became, the Worm God Emperor. So on Arrakis, there are creatures known as sandtrout, and they're basically these little creatures that basically swim around in the sand and encysted water. These sandtrout are actually the proto-life form of the sandworms. So eventually a bunch of sandtrout will become a single worm. They kind of come together and become a worm eventually. It's part of its life cycle. So Leto II, because of his Bene Gesserit inherited abilities, is able to take these sandtrout, manipulate his own chemistry in such a way to allow a symbiotic relationship to form. So he allowed the sandtrout to basically fuse to him and become a part of his body. Now, in the early stages of this, it was more like a sandtrout skin. Think, if you're a fan of comics, the symbiote from Venom. It was more of a skin. And as the millennia went on, the metamorphosis continued and he became more worm-like. Now that's the how. Now let's move on to the why. And a lot of people know the basic why, which is because to save humanity. He did it to save humanity. But why was this the way? Now, the basic reason is because this was the only way to live 4,000 years and to be able to see his plans through, essentially. Because Leto, like Paul Atreides, was prescient, and arguably his prescience was even clearer than Paul Atreides, especially once he took on the sandtrout skin. So Leto, like his father Paul, obviously saw that humanity was headed for an extinction event, and not just an extinction event, a devastating, painful, cruel extinction event. And he needed to live long enough to see that his plan to thwart it would actually be seen through. And the fact that he was on Arrakis and that he would be in a worm body also added to this, because the worms of Arrakis are central to the Imperium, right? So the spice, the guild navigators need it to navigate. You can't travel without spice. Plenty of people throughout the Imperium were addicted to spice, and spice withdrawals were deadly. So spice is very important. Therefore, the worms are very important because they're kind of at the center of all human events. So Leto takes this being, which is at the center of all human events, and makes it into a god. So it really is still at the center of all human events. And Arrakis is still at the center of all human events, not because it's the place where spice is produced, because in the distant future, another spoiler alert, it's no longer the place where spice is produced because it's terraformed. But it's still the center of all human events because that's now where the worm god lives, the last worm. Now, of course, the worm in the form of Shai-Hulud was already a god to the Fremen, but Leto took this kind of aesthetic and brought it to essentially the masses, and enforced the worship. So Leto was essentially harnessing the spiritual force of something that was once purely an economic thing, mostly. And actually, Neil Gaiman does a great job in his book American Gods of discussing, what is a god necessarily? Is a god, Thor or Yahweh, or can a god be an idea? Can a god be a system? Because if you look at the modern world, people are worshiping traditional gods less and less, and worshiping other things like social media, or just like a fandom, or conspiracy theory. What is really holding people's attention? What is really captivating them, and what are they dedicating a spiritual amount of attention to? What are they devoting themselves to? What are they devoting their lives to? And I say they, but I mean we, because I'm a human too, obviously. It's not traditional gods anymore. That's less and less. So Leto took something that wasn't divine in the traditional sense, but was divine in this kind of new sense. This spice trade, this worm, and he took it in a different direction and roped it back around and said, let me take it back to this original sense and show you how bad it is to worship anything, and show you how bad it is to be dependent on anything. I'm going to take this thing that doesn't speak, and I'm going to give it a voice, and I'm going to show you its true horror. So that's why Leto did what he did. Now let's talk about the actual cost to him. So because he does this, he is denied a life of his own, an actual human existence of his own. He has access to all of these other inner lives within his mind, but he can never have a human experience himself with his own body. The sandtrout skin rejects water. He can't. Moisture is like acid to him. So he can't have a lover. He doesn't have a penis, and yes, that's discussed in the books too. He can't really have human intimacy. And he also has to appear as a god, as something that is far above humanity. So he can't really like express any form of humanity openly. And as the years go on, he gradually becomes less and less human. He's simultaneously the most human and the least human at the same time, because he has all these inner lives and he has this intimate, deep understanding of humanity and what it is to be human, but he can never ever experience it firsthand, and he's tortured because of it. It's tragic. I mean, God Emperor of Dune is straight up a tragedy. So I think I covered everything that I wanted to cover in this video. Make sure you like and subscribe for more Quin's ideas, and if you have any more questions about the lore of Dune or questions about the lore of other science fiction series, leave them in the comment section below, and if enough people ask the same question, or if I'm intrigued enough by the question, I might make a video on the topic. Thank you so much for watching. By the way, I totally make graphic novels, and if you want to support me in this channel, then you can totally buy one off my website. Thank you so much.